Tanner Briggs was a tall, quiet ex-forest ranger with shoulders like a stone wall and the patience of a monk. He had a way of making even the noisiest bar fall silent with just a stare. Standing 6'3" and living off the edge of Maple Ridge, however, he'd built a quiet life after his wife passed. His world revolved around one thing: his 9-year-old daughter, Emmy. All freckles, braces, and big dreams. Maple Ridge wasn't your average community. On paper, it was all rose bushes and neat fences. But under the surface, power plays, gossip, and the HOA's iron grip. And sitting at the head of that little empire was none other than Karen Stokes. Karen was 5'2" with a bob haircut so sharp it could slice through aluminum. She wore blazers with shoulder pads and considered herself the protector of horror standards. But really, she was just a tyrant with a clipboard and a Bluetooth headset permanently fused to her ear. It all started on a warm Friday evening. Tanner had just finished planting a new batch of wildflowers along the edge of his property. Emmy was chalking the driveway with hopscotch and stick figures when Karen's SUV, a pearl white Escalade with more dents than dignity, came roaring round the bend like it was being chased by the devil. Tanner turned around just in time to see Emmy scream. The sound of tires screeching, a thud, then dragging. Emmy's backpack strap had snagged in Karen's rear tow hook, and for a horrifying 20 yards, she was pulled down the street, skin scraping, shoes torn off, screaming. Karen didn't stop until she pulled into her driveway. She got out of the car with a latte in hand and sunglasses perched on her head like nothing had happened. Tanner sprinted down the road, heart in his throat, kneeling beside his barely conscious daughter. Blood, bruises, and wide-eyed fear stared back at him. He scooped her up and bellowed, "You dragged my daughter." Karen sipped her drink and said, "She shouldn't have been playing near the street. It's against HOA safety protocol." Tanner stared at her, stunned. "You think this is about protocol?" Karen didn't even flinch. "And by the way, those wildflowers of yours, they're not on the approved planting list. You'll be hearing from us." That night, Emmy was admitted to the hospital. Stitches, bandages, and painkillers. Tanner sat beside her bed, hands clenched into fists. Police came, but Karen had cameras, footage that conveniently cut off before the incident. And thanks to her horror connections and community lawyer, no charges were filed. They called it an unfortunate accident. Tanner didn't sleep because something inside him broke. And once it broke, it didn't come back. The next morning, he stood alone on the porch, looking across the road at Karen's perfect lawn. Her flag fluttered in the breeze. Her little dog barked at squirrels, and she was sipping tea like nothing had happened. That's when Tanner made a call, not to the police, not to a lawyer, but to an old friend, one who didn't ask questions. Because Karen may have gotten away with it in court, but she was about to learn that not all justice wears a badge. 3 days passed since the accident, but Tanner hadn't spoken a word to anyone in the neighborhood. He didn't wave. He didn't nod. He only watched, mostly from his porch, sometimes from the shadows near the tree line that hugged the neighborhood's edge. Karen had gone back to her routines like it was just another week. Pilates on Zoom, complaining to the horror board. Her Escalade even had a new chrome trim. But there was something else now, a crack in her world. Late one night, she came out to retrieve a package, and the motion light didn't turn on. She muttered about cheap bulbs, but when she stepped back, inside, her porch light flickered on behind her. It stayed on the rest of the night. The next morning, she found deep gouges along the rear bumper of her car, not keyed, deliberate claw-like scrapes, no fingerprints, no cameras working either. Her Bluetooth doorbell, fried. Karen stood in the driveway, lips pressed tight, scanning the homes across the street. Tanner's windows were dark. She filed a complaint with the HOA security team. They promised patrols, but Karen knew the patrols were mostly teenagers who watched Netflix from their golf carts. Inside her house, she jumped at every creak. She double-locked the doors, kept the dog inside, turned off the backyard lights, then turned them back on, and every time she passed by a window, she felt watched. Across the street, Tanner was rewiring something inside his shed, hands covered in grease, eyes quiet, methodical. Next to him, Emmy sat in a wheelchair, sketching something in her notebook, something with flames. Later that night, Karen received an envelope taped to her door, no stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photo, her, sipping tea on her porch, taken from behind, just inches away from the back of her neck. She staggered backward, dropping her mug. The photo fluttered to the ground. The next morning, HOA security arrived and walked through her lawn with metal detectors. They found nothing, no footprints, no signs of break-in. But the power to her front security panel had been cut clean, no scorch marks. A single wire, sliced as if by scalpel. Karen tried to warn the whore president. She made a scene at the clubhouse, demanding police involvement. They calmed her down with pastries and platitudes. Tanner watched all from a distance, arms folded, no expression. Later that evening, Karen stood in her kitchen, pouring wine. She opened the fridge to grab cheese, but inside was something she didn't expect. Her garden gnome, covered in red paint, its little ceramic arms broken off and glued backwards, pointing toward the backyard. She screamed. By the time security arrived again, the gnome was gone, and the camera that faced the backyard, still glitching, just static. Tanner, meanwhile, had built something strange beside his shed, a thick wooden door on the ground, covered in moss. Emmy wasn't allowed near it. He never opened it during the day. That night, Karen couldn't sleep. Every sound made her flinch. Even the little bark of her dog felt too loud. She finally locked herself in her room and turned on a white noise machine. But just past midnight, the white noise turned into something else. Whispers. Coming from inside the speaker. She unplugged it, but the sound continued for a second too long. As if something didn't want to stop, she screamed again, this time louder. Across the street, Tanner turned off the shed light. His time was getting close. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was trying to prepare her, because she had no idea what was beneath his land, and once he opened that door, there wouldn't be a way back out. Tanner's hands trembled only once as he lifted the wooden hatch. It had been sealed for years, an old supply shelter built by his grandfather, reinforced with cold forged steel and hidden under thick layers of pine needles. Few people even knew it existed. Even fewer knew what it held. He stepped down the rusted ladder with a flashlight gripped in his jaw. The smell was a mix of oil, earth, and memory. Tools still hung neatly on hooks. All generators stood in the corners, untouched since the late 90s. But Tanner wasn't here to relive the past. He was here to prepare a message. Back above ground, Emmy remained in the wheelchair. Her knees were still wrapped tight in gauze, but her eyes were different now, harder. Her sketchbook sat on her lap, open to a fresh page. She wasn't drawing animals anymore. She was drawing a house, Karen's house, with flames coming from every window. Emmy didn't say much since the hospital, but when she did speak, her words were cold, measured. Are you going to do it? She asked. Without looking up, Tanner placed a hand on her shoulder. Not yet. Across the street, Karen had finally hired private security. A lean man in his 40s, with sharp eyes and a shaved head, now sat in a parked sedan near her driveway. His name was Bryce. He was ex-military, the kind that didn't ask questions and didn't flinch easily. But on his second night, Bryce saw something strange. Around 3:12 a.m., motion alerts went off. He checked the dash monitor and froze. Someone had walked past the side of Karen's garage. Not just walked, paused, turned toward the camera, and stared for exactly 4 seconds. The man's face was partially hidden, but his stance was unmistakable. It was Tanner. Except when Bryce ran outside with his flashlight and sidearm ready, there were no tracks, no sound, no sign of forced entry. Only one thing stood where the figure had been, an old pine branch, stripped clean, driven into the dirt like a stake, and wrapped in Emmy's shoelace. Bryce didn't sleep after that. Karen, meanwhile, began to unravel. She started calling HOA board members at all hours, insisting someone was inside her house at night, that furniture was being moved, that the dog barked at corners, that her toothbrush was damp before she ever touched it. They dismissed her concerns, laughed, even maybe lay off the wine. Someone joked, but Bryce didn't laugh. The next day, he knocked on Tanner's front door. Tanner opened it slow, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. Bryce kept his tone even. I know what she did. I've seen the hospital reports. She deserves worse. But if you're behind this, you better stop before it gets deeper. Tanner didn't blink. I haven't touched her. Bryce narrowed his eyes. That's supposed to comfort me. Tanner smiled. I'm not trying to comfort you. Then closed the door. That night, the whispering returned, but not through machines. It came from under Karen's floorboards. She called an electrician. He checked everything. No crossed wires, no rodents, no faulty speakers. But when he pulled back a basement panel, he found a child's drawing tucked inside the insulation. It was Emmy's. It showed a woman inside a black box, screaming, Karen, fire the electrician on the spot. By now, even the horse started to keep their distance. Karen's emails went unanswered. Her friend's circle began shrinking. No one wanted to be associated with what they called her spiral. Only Bryce stuck around. But he kept glancing across the street more and more, because something was off, something was coming, and deep beneath that pine-covered hatch, Tanner was nearly finished. He didn't want revenge, he wanted transformation, and once that door closed again, nothing above it would be the same. At exactly 4:17 a.m., Karen Stokes vanished. Her porch light flickered once. The blinds in her living room twitched like someone had passed too close. Her dog barked for 7 full minutes before falling silent, with a high-pitched yelp. When Bryce arrived just before sunrise, her Escalade was still in the driveway. Front door locked. No signs of forced entry. But no Karen. Only her dog sat trembling by the door, leash wrapped tight around its own legs as if it had spun in panic for hours. Bryce stepped inside. The kitchen light was on, a glass of red wine tipped on the counter, one shoe in the hall, the other near the back sliding door, cracked open by a few inches. He didn't see blood, he didn't see a struggle, but he felt something had passed through this house. Something that didn't knock. Upstairs, her phone lay face down on the bed. One final text sent to the HOA board at 3:44 a.m. If anything happens to me, it's Tanner Briggs. You're all complicit. No one answered. Bryce called the police. They arrived within 30 minutes, took statements, walked through the house with gloved hands and unsure expressions. They didn't treat it like a crime scene, just a wellness check gone wrong. She was known to exaggerate, to drink, to ramble. Maybe she went to a friend's place. They said, maybe she took a walk. But the neighbors knew better. Karen didn't leave without her car, her purse, or her control. And now she was gone. Across the street, Tanner stood beside Emmy's wheelchair, sipping coffee from a metal thermos. He didn't look toward the flashing lights or the squad cars. He just stood there. Calm. Emmy watched too, drawing something in her book. Bryce crossed the street later that morning. No backup. Just his nerves. Tanner didn't move. I'm not here to accuse, Bryce said, with steady. But she's gone. And you were the last person she warned about. Tanner tilted his head. She warned people about a lot of things. Bryce looked toward the shed. The ground around it had been disturbed. Fresh rake lines, branches removed. Whatever this is, it's not over, Bryce said. You can't just erase her. Tanner's eyes darkened. I didn't erase her. I gave her a moment to listen. Bryce took a slow step back. You talking in riddles now? Tanner didn't answer, just closed the gate behind him. Later that day, HOA members met in a private garage 2 blocks away. No Karen meant no president, no leader, and no order. Half of them blamed stress. The other half whispered about Tanner. But none of them dared file a report, because each of them had something to hide. Fines, favoritism, misused funds, and Karen had kept the records. Now those records were gone, and so was she. Back at Tanner's place, Emmy asked the question he'd been expecting. Is she under the house? Tanner hesitated, then knelt beside her. She's not under anything, he said. She's learning something no one else would teach her. That night, Bryce parked closer than usual. He left the car running, kept one hand near his sidearm. His eyes didn't leave the shed. At 2:36 a.m., he saw the hatch open and a figure, tall, limping slightly, climbing out. Wrapped in a blanket. It was Karen. She looked changed. No scratches, no bruises, but her eyes were hollow, mouth moving in silent murmurs, body trembling like she'd survived a different season entirely. She stood in the yard, staring up at her own house, then turned around and walked into the woods. Not toward her door, not toward safety, but into the thick dark where no path led. Bryce stepped out of the car, but he didn't follow. Something about her face, the blankness, the slack jaw, told him not to interfere, not yet. The next morning, Karen came home. She wasn't brought there. She wasn't seen by anyone returning. But at 7:12 a.m., Bryce found her sitting in a rocking chair on her front porch, eyes open, hands folded neatly over her lap. The same blanket she'd worn in the woods was now draped over her shoulders, soaked in dew. Her hair was tangled with pine needles. Her lips moved, whispering something only she could hear. Bryce didn't approach at first. He just stood by the sidewalk and waited for her to acknowledge him. She never did. When the horror board got word, two of them showed up, Tom and Bethany, hoping to stabilize the growing panic. But Karen didn't speak to them either. She just stared out at the road, like it no longer meant anything. Tom tried joking to lighten the mood. Guess you just needed a nature break. Huh? Karen slowly turned to him, not with a smile, not even with anger, just an empty look. I saw what I was supposed to, she said quietly. You will too. That's when they left, and the whispers round Maple Ridge started to shift from mockery to fear. Later that day, Bryce returned with food and water. Karen hadn't moved in over 6 hours, but when he set the plate down, she blinked and whispered, "They're beneath us now." Listening, Bryce crouched low, trying to find something human in her voice. But she was gone. Her movements, her speech, everything felt hollow, like the part of her that fought, that insulted, that raged, had been scraped out and replaced with a vacuum. And the strangest thing of all, Karen never mentioned Tanner again. Not once. That evening, Tanner took Emmy out in her wheelchair as usual. They stopped by the edge of the road, beneath the same tall pines that had always stood watch over Maple Ridge. Emmy tugged at his sleeve. "She's empty now," she said. Tanner nodded. Sometimes truth takes everything. Emmy looked at the drawing on her lap. This one showed a tall woman holding a broken mirror, but no reflection inside. Back across the street, Karen began digging. It started around midnight. A neighbor walking her dog noticed movement in Karen's flower bed. She thought it was a raccoon, until the porch light revealed Karen, on her knees, hand scooping dirt with a kitchen spoon. She wasn't planting anything. She was looking for something. The next morning, a dozen holes marked her front yard, one next to the mailbox, one behind the bird bath, another directly under the American flagpole. No one stopped her. No one asked. Not anymore. And just when things seemed like they couldn't sink lower, Bryce found a small object lodged in the dirt behind Karen's house. It was a baby monitor. Still powered. Still transmitting. But not to a handheld unit. The signal was going somewhere underground. That same night, Tanner unsealed the hatch again. But this time, he didn't go in. He stood over it, staring down into the dark, and whispered a single sentence, "She's not ready yet." Then he closed it, locked it, and returned to his porch, where Emmy waited with a new drawing. This one showed Karen, no face, no features, standing in front of her black door, chain shut, with whispers curling out from the sides like smoke. The drawing was titled, "Not Done Yet." Bryce kept his distance after that. He still drove past, still kept to look out, But something told him that whatever Tanner had done wasn't finished. It had only paused because Karen may have returned. But she didn't come back alone. 3 days after Karen's return, her neighbors started hearing sounds, not shouting, not music, but voices, then an echoing, sliding through the drywall late at night like wind through a cracked window. Bethany, who lived 2 doors down, heard them first. She thought it was the TV left on. But when she walked through her house at 2 a.m., the voices didn't fade. They followed. Soft, layered, like whispers spoken in unison, just beyond understanding. The next night, Tom heard them too. They came through the air vents. They paused when he listened, and once they laughed, but not like anything human, or dry, cracking sound that faded too fast to be real. Karen, meanwhile, hadn't moved from her porch. Her grass had grown wild. Her sprinkler system hadn't activated in days. Her front window had a jagged crack running across it now, no sign of impact, just a slow-growing fracture like something pressed from inside. Bryce had returned to his car watch, but kept the engine running. His eyes no longer scanned for intruders. He was watching Karen now, not for protection, but because something inside her still hadn't surfaced. It was Emmy who noticed the change first. Her hands don't cast shadows anymore, she said softly from her wheelchair. Tanner didn't speak. He just handed her another pencil and let her draw. That night, Tanner walked to the edge of the HOA boundary, where the perfectly manicured sidewalk turned into untamed brush and tangled roots. He stood near the community notice board and looked at the list of upcoming events. HOA bake sale, board member elections, full repairs pending, budget approval. He smiled. The board still believed they were in control. The same night, Bryce sat in his sedan watching Karen when his radio crackled. Not a normal dispatch call, no station ID. Just static, and a whisper, clear as glass. You brought her back. Why? He yanked the power cord. But the whisper came again, this time from the car's rear speaker, which wasn't even connected to the radio. He left the car and walked to the sidewalk, gun holstered, sweat clinging to his back. Karen stood up for the first time in hours. Not fast, just steady. She walked down the path barefoot, the blankets still draped across her shoulders, and without looking at him, she whispered, "They've picked a new voice now." Bryce backed away. Karen didn't follow. The next morning, Tanner was seen boarding up his shed, not with nails, but with symbols etched into wood, burned into the grain, symbols older than the property itself. The HOA sent a notice of violation. He didn't open it. By afternoon, strange smells drifted through the neighborhood, earthy, bitter, and almost metallic. Several residents called pest control, others blamed wild mushrooms, but those who lived closest to Karen's house stopped answering the door because the whispers were getting louder. Now they came during daylight. Through showers, behind mirrors, in baby monitors and ceiling fans. One couple left in the middle of the night, their moving truck abandoned in the driveway. Bryce confronted Tanner the next day. "You did this. Whatever that hole is, whatever you opened, it's not staying underground." Tanner just looked at him. "She dragged my daughter and left," he said calmly. "I didn't lay a finger on her. I gave her time. But she brought something back with her. That part wasn't mine." Bryce leaned in. "Then, help me stop it." Tanner's face changed. "You can't stop something that only listens when the world's quiet." That night, Karen's lights blinked out. Every bulb, every wire, dark. And in the silence, a humming began. Low, faint, but pulsing. Like breathing. And then the neighborhood slept with their doors locked, but knew it wouldn't matter, because now the thing inside Karen wasn't just watching. It was listening, and it was learning who to speak through next. The neighborhood woke to silence. No birds, no wind, not even the familiar hum of distant traffic. Just stillness. Bryce noticed it first, sitting in his sedan, half asleep. He blinked as the usual morning breeze refused to stir the leaves. Something in the air felt heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm, but colder. He stepped out and scanned the street. Tanner's porch was empty, and Emmy's wheelchair was tipped over in the grass. No sign of her. No tracks. Just the sketchbook, pages fluttering in a wind that didn't reach the trees. Bryce called out, walked across the road. Knocked. Nothing. He circled the side yard. The shed, boarded up for days, now stood open. Symbols scratched off. The air inside had turned cooler, deeper, as if space itself had stretched beneath the earth. Bryce stepped inside. The hatch was gone. Not open. Gone. The wooden door lay shattered in pieces, as if something had clawed its way up from below. And resting on top of the broken boards was Emmy's shoe. Bryce picked it up gently. It was warm. Still warm. He called the sheriff's office, but by the time they arrived, Tanner had returned, carrying firewood. Unbothered. His voice steady as ever. Did she go in there, Bryce? Demanded. Tanner didn't look at the shed. She's stronger than you think. She's just a kid. She's not just anything, Tanner replied. And she didn't disappear. She followed it. Because it whispered her name, and no one else could hear it. Bryce pointed toward the hatch. And you let her? Tanner's jaw clenched. I didn't let anything. This place was hers before it was mine. She chose. That's more than I can say for Karen. They both turned when they heard the barking. Karen's dog, for the first time in over a week, it had left the porch. It stood in the middle of the street now, growling at Tanner's shed for bristled eyes locked on the black hole in the ground. Karen herself hadn't been seen since the night the lights went out. Her house now looked abandoned, windows fogged from the inside, the door slightly ajar, the lawn full of deep, uneven patches, like someone had tried burying something but gave up halfway. The evening, the horror board gathered. Not in the clubhouse, not in public. In a backyard, under the flicker of solar lanterns, surrounded by fear. Tom, Bethany, and two others sat stiffly around a folding table. They'd seen too much, heard too much, and most important of all, they'd stopped feeling like they were in charge. We need to evict him, Bethany whispered. We can't keep letting this go. He's dangerous. Tom shook his head. Eviction requires a majority vote and a violation. The bylaws. Screw the bylaws. Another snapped. We used to run this neighborhood. Now half of us won't even open our blinds. That's when they noticed something pinned to the fence behind them. A single drawing. Emmy's. It showed for stick figures sitting around a table, all of them with blacked out eyes, all of them inside a spiral. Below it was written, they voted. Too late. Bryce didn't sleep that night. He parked closer than usual, kept the radio off, sat in the dark. And as midnight approached, the whispering returned. Not in his car, not in his radio. In his mind. She's beneath. She's learning. She's listening. He covered his ears. But it didn't stop. Not this time. Across the street, Tanner stood at the edge of the driveway, silent, hands behind his back. The porch light flickered once, and for a split second, a small hand reached up from the black of the shed hatch. Then vanished again. The next morning, the wind finally returned. Leaves stirred, flags rustled. Wind chimes gave off a slow metallic sigh. But Maple Ridge felt no lighter. By noon, word had spread. The HOA president was missing again. The board had quietly suspended meetings. No new notices, no lawn citations, no newsletters, just silence. And in that silence, the spiral deepened. Tanner didn't say much. He sat beside the broken shed hatch, carving something into wood. The pieces looked like puzzle fragments, each with a different symbol burned into its surface. He arranged them slowly, methodically. As if waiting. That night, Bryce returned again. But this time, without his badge or his sidearm, he stepped onto Tanner's porch, his shadow stretching across Emmy's overturned wheelchair. I heard her voice again, he said, clearer this time. Tanner didn't look up. She's almost ready. Bryce leaned on the railing. What does that mean? Ready for what? Tanner paused, then spoke softly. Some people break when the world hurts them. Others dig. Emmy. She listened, and what she found listening back it didn't want to hurt her. It wanted her to speak. Speak what? Tanner finally looked up. A truth this place forgot. That night, for neighbors disappeared. No signs of struggle. Doors still locked from the inside. Meals still warm on tables. But gone, like they'd stepped sideways out of the world. And each of their lawns had a drawing pinned to the mailbox. Same spiral, same empty eyes. Same words. Too late. The police returned. They searched Tanner's house, his shed, his yard. Nothing. Not even the hatch. It was gone now, covered in fresh earth. As if it had never existed. Only Bryce noticed the faint outline in the dirt, a perfect spiral carved by hand. Later that evening, Bryce sat in his car, eyes heavy, heart pounding. That's when he saw her. Emmy. Standing in the middle of the street. Not limping, not bruised, but tall, calm, her eyes clear and silent. She didn't speak, but the moment he opened the door, she raised a hand and pointed toward Karen's house. Its porch light flickered once, then burst. Bryce ran toward it. Inside, the smell was thick, not rot, but something older, earthy, cold, and beneath the floorboards, the voices were no longer whispers. They were chanting. Karen sat on the stairs. Rocking. Murmuring. I tried to bury it, but it keeps rising. I tried. In her lap was a drawing, one not from Emmy's hand. This one showed the entire neighborhood, but twisted, roads spiraling inward, houses melted into curves, trees bent at angles that didn't obey gravity. At the center, a small figure. Smiling. Eyes open wide. Bryce backed out slowly. When he turned, Emmy was gone again, and Tanner stood in her place. She's where she belongs now, Tanner said. And now, so are you? Bryce staggered. Beck, I didn't choose this. You watched it happen, Tanner said. And that's enough. From behind Tanner, the shed hatch opened again. But this time, not downward. Upward. Light spilled from it, soft, flickering, like the glow from beneath deep water. And from that glow came a sound. A voice, clear. Familiar. Dad. Tanner turned. He smelled and stepped inside. Then the hatch shut, not with a slam, but with a hum, as if sealed by something not mechanical, but alive. Bryce ran back to his car, back to the edge of Maple Ridge. But when he looked in the rearview mirror, the street was empty again. No houses. No trees. No roads. Just spirals, endless spirals. Would you follow your child into something you didn't understand, just to bring them back? Or would you accept that some places, some truths, were never meant to be unearthed? The silence at the end of this road isn't the end, it's the beginning.